There are two notable elements that are foundational to most mainline Legend of Zelda games: the theme of growing up and their relation to Ocarina of Time. Ever since the beginning, Zelda has been inspired by childhood, and the games are frequently coming-of-age stories. Even when Link doesn't really start a game as a child, it's often about him growing up and learning to accept responsibility. The biggest example of this is how, after pulling the Master Sword, Link is forced to grow up in Ocarina of Time, literally by jumping 7 years. Ocarina of Time established the 3D Zelda formula for years to come, and is arguably the most acclaimed Zelda game. Every 3D Zelda can be defined by its relation to Ocarina of Time. Majora's Mask directly followed it, reusing the same engine. Twilight Princess brought back a lot of elements to make a bigger version of it, and both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom deliberately stray away from it, taking design philosophies from the original Legend of Zelda instead. The version of Hyrule from Ocarina of Time looms large over the whole series. Everybody has their favorite Zelda game, and for me it's The Wind Waker. It was the Zelda game I played when I was 8, so how could it not be? The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker released in 2002 for GameCube, and it is objectively not the perfect game. It released just 2 years after Majora's Mask for brand new hardware, and it ended up being extremely rushed. You can see the cut corners, underexplored potential, frustrating design elements, and places a dungeon was supposed to be but wasn't when you play. Since Majora's Mask was always a consideration when developing Ocarina of Time, The Wind Waker was sort of Nintendo's first try at following up their magnum opus. For many, it didn't succeed. But there's a reason The Wind Waker is praised so heavily now. It has soul, and once you peer within, you'll find a deep, intelligent story that directly deals with how to follow up the legend. So today, I want to talk about the story of my childhood favorite Zelda game, and just how it grew past Ocarina of Time's legacy. If you enjoy, please subscribe, as I'm trying to get to at least 1,000 subscribers by the end of 2025. Thank you. This is but one of the legends of which the people speak. Those 12 words open up The Wind Waker, followed by a cinematic essentially describing the events of Ocarina of Time. A young boy, named the Hero of Time, rises to defeat an evil man who stole a prosperous kingdom's golden power. Years later, the evil power returns, and the Hero of Time is nowhere to be found. I wonder what he's up to. Without their hero, the people could only pray to their gods for help. Now there exists a certain island with a tradition of garbing boys in green, like the Hero of Time, once they reach a certain age. It wasn't unusual for two Zelda games to share connections when The Wind Waker released. There was Zelda 2, Majora's Mask, in both Oracle games, but there was never such a layer of abstraction. The Wind Waker is a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time, and seemingly Majora's Mask, but it's been long enough that the events have passed into legend. That phrase, "this is but one of the legends of which the people speak," says a lot. If it's just one of the legends, how can we be sure that the events of Ocarina of Time happened as we understand them? Sure, The Wind Waker has many direct callbacks, and it would later be clear that Ocarina of Time happened, but this framing device makes the events of the story and the series feel unreliable. The series is made up of legends, and legends aren't always true to reality, especially with the massive art style change from Ocarina of Time to this game. Discussion surrounding The Wind Waker is incomplete without mentioning the backlash to its art style. You see this ugly CGI trailer? That's what gamers wanted from the next Zelda, and they were upset that the game actually looked good. I'm exaggerating a little. It is fair to have been disappointed in The Wind Waker's cel-shaded art style if you genuinely didn't like it. I think your tastes are shit, but fine. I personally think it's gorgeous, and easily the most expressive Zelda game yet. But what really interests me is how it affects the story. When the game looks so different from Ocarina of Time, it gives the sense that The Wind Waker is a different legend told by different people in a different way to Ocarina of Time. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but for a game so connected to Ocarina of Time to change its art style so much, it's gotta mean something. The Wind Waker introduces the framing device that the series would loosely adopt going forward, all with one sentence and an art style change. The opening in general is super interesting. I'd argue the first hour or so of The Wind Waker is pretty perfect. Wow, I can't believe I spent all that time analyzing instead of just summarizing a bunch like every video essay. Anyways, we are introduced to our player character, this game's version of Link. He lives with his sister and his grandmother on a small island in the middle of a vast, expansive ocean. It's Link's birthday, so he receives a telescope from his sister, and his grandma gives him the familiar green clothes Links have sported since the beginning. It's clear from the dialogue upon receiving the clothes, and from Link's expression, that he doesn't really like them. I can't blame him, because the outfit he was wearing earlier looks way more comfortable. This opening does a pretty good job at endearing me to the characters on the island, such as Link's family. This is a video game though, so Link's sister is immediately kidnapped by a giant bird while some pirates show up to the island. The birthday boy has to pick up a sword and shield to fight the bird, but it's already flown away. He decides he has to sail away, and the only ship belongs to those pirates. The pirates are kinda cruel to Link at first. They insult him and are a rough sort, but they do take him on board. They kinda were the ones who led the bird there in the first place. We do like the pirates though, they're fun, they seem to be big softies, and their leader Tetris clearly has some secrets going on. Anyways, Link sets sail without saying a word to his grandma. Yeah, Link in this game is actually kinda cruel. I mean, he's not bad, but he is selfish the way a kid would be selfish. Sometimes he doesn't tell people information or gets annoyed easily. Later on, Link revisits his island and one of the villagers shames him for not telling anyone what happened. You can see the heartbreak Link's grandma feels by having 2 children taken away from her. There's even one part of the game where you meet someone whose child was kidnapped, and whenever he sees you, he runs towards you and forces you to hear his dialogue. You'll end up running away from him and trying to avoid him in a way that shows callous indifference. One of your dialogue options, if he does catch up to you, is to say, "You, no." It's actually a very effective way of using something annoying deliberately to make a point in a video game, and it's a really memorable part of the game. Link is a kind person in The Wind Waker, but growing up means making mistakes and hurting people in ways you can't tell because you're naive and inexperienced. This undertone is explored in a subtle yet mature way in The Wind Waker. It also works well because Link is a silent protagonist. Link was always intended as an audience surrogate, and he almost never talks in any of the games, but he's often given personality to make him his own character, and not just a blank slate. This is an example of that, and given the expressive nature of The Wind Waker's art style, this is one of the most expressive and personality-filled Links in the series. The CDI and cartoon versions of Link probably have a Wind Waker beat on those fronts, but that's not a good personality. So that's our Link in a nutshell. His journey takes him to the Forsaken Fortress, and man do I have memories with the Forsaken Fortress. This analysis is meant to cover the story, not the gameplay, but this is a video game, so the 2 concepts are inherently tied to one another. The Forsaken Fortress is an area where the gameplay tells a story. Right away, your sword is taken away, which teaches you that there's more to fighting enemies than just swinging it around. It gives the player a real sense of dread. The place is atmospheric and creepy. Even being spotted by a moblin once will have you sent to jail. I was terrified as a kid. If you're not familiar with the Zelda formula very much, a kid can very easily be scared out of their mind by the sense of powerlessness. You move straight from the bright and cheery outset island to this, which makes for a striking opening hour. The mini-blin enemies haunted my nightmares. Eventually, you'll realize you can't rescue your sister as you are now, so you'll have to flee, but not before getting a look at your enemy, Ganondorf. He's certainly induced a lot of dread with this section, and even worse than that, he's hot. You wake up on a faraway island, separated from the pirates. You are saved by a talking boat. This is the point at which I should talk about the actual format of the Wind Waker story, because it's not exactly in-depth. Zelda is a simple series with a simple format, and as with most Nintendo series, the gameplay is the primary consideration. The story of the Wind Waker has themes, but if you were just looking at the dialogue like a movie, it wouldn't be up to par because it's a different medium. I used to bemoan Zelda storylines being too simple and having too many underexplored elements, but as I grew up, I started to realize that it's a part of the charm. You can still criticize the story, I will do that here, and would a game with the gameplay of Ocarina of Time and story of The Lord of the Rings be cool? Sure. But Zelda isn't about establishing grand narratives with complex character arcs necessarily. That said, this is the part of the game where the plot needs to get rolling, and the King of Red Lions is a big exposition dump. He explains that the enemy we encountered was Ganon, and we must go on a journey of true hardship if we are to defeat him. It's a bit clunky. We don't doubt there's a reason the King of Red Lions knows about us and Ganon, but the very moment we are introduced to him is the moment where he gives us a bunch of information before he can ever really be a character. It's the kind of hiccup that would be a way bigger flaw in a more traditional narrative, but it's still somewhat of a flaw here. It shows some foibles that can arise from Link's silent nature too, since he seems to spend a lot of time being talked at. Also, the King of Red Lions is a talking boat. This entire world is covered by a huge ocean, so we'll be using him to sail the seas. He guides Link on his adventure. He needs a sail if he's to go anywhere though, so Link explores Windfall Island a bit and amasses enough rupees to buy one. We set off across the vast blue sea to an island he marked on our maps, Dragon Roost Island. The following two islands are our first traditional Zelda dungeons. You go to a new location, hear the plight of the people, and adventure into the dungeon to help their cause. You get a new item, fight some enemies, solve puzzles, and fight the bosses who are conveniently weak to the item you just got. It's a fun time. Dragon Roost Island is home to the Rito, a race of bird people with the tradition of climbing up a mountain as a coming-of-age ritual. The other island you visit is Forest Haven, the domain of the Great Deku Tree, a character who made his first appearance in Ocarina of Time. The Kokiri have been replaced by Koroks, small wooden forest sprites that luckily are not scattered all over the world, requiring you to find their seeds. On Dragon Roost Island, you're given the titular Wind Waker by the King of Red Lions, a baton that can control the winds, and it has a special connection to the Wind God. The important characters we need to remember from these islands are children. Dragon Roost Island is home to Medli and Komali. Medli is a shrine attendant who Link helps out, and is a pretty likable character. Komali is a young boy who's too scared to climb the mountain because of Valu's rampages, which are being spurred on by one of Ganon's monsters. By clearing the dungeon, Komali is inspired by Link's courage and conveniently gives him a sacred item we need, Din's Pearl. The Koroks are perpetually youthful. The Deku Tree refers to them as being forever his cherished little children. We can assume they don't age, like the Kokiri in Ocarina of Time didn't. You have to rescue one of them, Makar, from another one of Ganon's monsters. These two island plotlines are simple stories that read like fables when I read them aloud like this, but they do convey the dark influence Ganon is slowly starting to have over the world. Link is our hero, so we should see him heroing. I also want to mention one part about the dungeons in particular. We are slowly drip-fed more and more strong enemies in a very deliberate way. Moblins are a strong enemy that we couldn't even attempt to fight back at the Forsaken Fortress. Dragon Roost Island has us fight one for the first time, while the Forest Haven dungeon gives us two at a time to deal with. While the combat is very simple, there's a lot of complexity in enemy behavior that makes for one of my favorite combat systems in any Zelda game. Certain strong enemies can push you away or try to bait out attacks, and at certain points you can press the A button to do a parry attack, which affects enemies in different ways depending on the situation. Sometimes enemies can lose their weapons, having them make a mad dash for it, or even grab another one. You can also pick up their weapons. It reminds me of some of the combat encounters possible in the open world Zelda title Breath of the Wild 15 years later. After those two quests, we've got a third pearl to look for, and the King of Red Lions gave us an island to go to, only for it to be completely destroyed and devoid of the blue Dragon Ball we wanted. This island is a stormy mess, without any indication that something was once here. Then we meet the Rito Postman. I didn't mention him before, but he's a bro. He's very helpful to us, and he tells us that the Pearl is located somewhere on Outset Island, Link's home island. We need some bombs though, so back to Windfall it is. I really like this section. It's a fun detour that subverts our expectations using the rule of 3. Back on Windfall Island, we encounter the pirates again. They captured the owner of the bomb store, and will set out to Outset in the morning. Tetra clearly sees us sneaking around, and gives us the time to get the treasure before she can. It's not clear if she wants us to get it, or if she just doesn't think we can get to it before her, but either way, it's clear she's not a bad guy. Zelda has a tradition of having ally characters that guide you, like Midna, Tetra, or Tattle, who are a little more mean at first before warming up to you. It's a natural way to build a character arc and a personality. Zelda has been long accused of holding the player's hand, so tutorial characters offering some resistance keeps them interesting, and helps them grow beyond their purpose. We need to sneak onto the pirate ship while they sleep to get their bombs, and what is this? Look at me right now. Do you see the problem here? The bomb shop owner is tied up already. Why can't I just take his bombs when they're here on the counter? I'm definitely nitpicking right now, but it is the kind of thing that breaks ludo-narrative synergy a little bit when there's such an obvious solution. The thing I need to take is right there. We take the bombs from Tetra's ship, and we set out for Outset Island. You don't have to do anything on Outset Island. If you want, you can blow up a rock in Link's backyard, talk to a fish thing named Jabun, grab the pearl, and leave. But you're encouraged to explore around a little bit. There's a fairy fountain that can increase the amount of rupees you can carry. You'll eventually need that, thanks to Tingle shenanigans. If you choose to talk to Link's grandma, you'll find her sick and devastated by you leaving. It's really sad. If you heal her with the fairy, she'll wake up and talk to you, apologizing for worrying so much. Our hero might have flaws, but he's fundamentally a kind person, and has the capacity to learn from his mistakes. This interaction is entirely optional, which gives it more power, because you have to go out of your way to show that Link is kind. There is a gameplay benefit to healing Grandma, because she gives you the Elixir Soup, a powerful drinkable item that restores health, doubles your attack power, and can be used twice. But the convenience of a fairy that can restore you after each death is arguably more useful anyways. From an adult perspective, saving Link's grandma is something I need to do every time I play, or I will feel bad, and it's one of the most memorable parts of the Wind Waker. Moving on, I find it interesting that there's no dungeon before the third Pearl. That's probably why the journey to Windfall happened. I imagine they were planning Jabun to be the dungeon. He's a clear homage to Jabu Jabu from Ocarina of Time, and a dungeon in his belly seems like it was the original plan. This is maybe a personal thing, but I like Zelda games with more out-of-dungeon sections than sections inside of dungeons. The lead up to each dungeon can be more interesting than the dungeons themselves sometimes. Now that we have the pearls, we need to prove ourselves as the hero Hyrule needs. According to Mr. of Red Lions, there's a trial we need to take called the Tower of the Gods. It's a pretty fun dungeon. We got the bow and arrow, learn the command melody for the Wind Waker, and fight a powerful mini-boss knight called a Dark Nut midway through. The Dark Nut is another interesting enemy type that has its own ways of engaging with us. You can knock off its helmet and armor by hitting its weak spot, and if it's unarmed, it will try to attack with martial arts. Eventually, we clear the dungeon, proving us worthy. But the most interesting part is what happens directly afterwards. Now that the gods have acknowledged us as a true hero, we descend deep into the sea, and we reach Hyrule Castle. It doesn't look quite the same as it did in Ocarina of Time, but we're in the classic location. The old, familiar Hyrule is on the sea floor. You're on the search for some sort of item, but are up against a mighty threshold, an extremely difficult puzzle. Even perceiving this puzzle, much less solving it, is a feat of extreme logic. You need an extremely high IQ. The most striking part of Hyrule Castle's interior is that it's all grayscale, with a huge crowd of moblins and darknuts frozen in time, without much of an explanation as to why. Presumably, the gods must have frozen Hyrule in place once they flooded it, but that's not really known for sure. By this point, you've only faced one darknut and two moblins at a time, so walking this room is very anxiety-inducing. Thank God for that veneer of safety. After solving the puzzle, you find the Master Sword, the recurring sword featured throughout the series ever since A Link to the Past. It's the blade of evil's bane, and the only thing that can really defeat Ganondorf. Only a hero chosen by the gods can wield the blade, and obtaining the Master Sword has been used across the series to mark the point of no return in Link's adventure. By pulling the sword, you cement yourself as a hero, and it's not just about being the hero. After pulling it, light is restored completely to the castle, and you have to fight all the monsters you just saw frozen in time. This is the Hero of Wind's coming-of-age moment. You've been encountering these tougher monsters, slowly and carefully, in a way that both makes the challenge not too tough, and builds dread. Now, you're thrown into the deep end, and have to fight over 15 of these monsters at a time, all in one room. The battle isn't that difficult if you know what you're doing, but it feels incredible each time, and conveys the growth Link has had to go through on his adventure. I can't help but once again be reminded of Ocarina of Time. In that game, Link's childhood is stolen from him. As he takes the Master Sword, 7 years instantly pass without him even realizing it. By waiting 7 years, Ganondorf is allowed to rise, and his dark influence stretches over Hyrule more and more. In the Wind Waker, Ganondorf has already risen, and is in a state of being temporarily held back with no hero in sight. By becoming that hero, the threat of Ganon's forces are fully unleashed. Link is no longer just a boy in his grandma's clothes. The game presents Link's rise to hero status as a glorious acceptance of responsibility, with Link carrying on the legacy of the past, but it's not clear if it's supposed to be an unambiguously good thing. It's certainly not fair that Link can't have a normal childhood. It brings to mind many real-life situations where children raised in difficult environments aren't allowed time to be children, and have to be thrust into adult responsibilities. That can be traumatic and shouldn't be portrayed as some moment of accepting glorious purpose. It only perpetuates the cycles of trauma and violence that cause a child to have to step up in the first place. But at the same time, it's because of Ganondorf that this happens. So is the game portraying it as unambiguously good, or as an unfair eventuality that happens when evil is in power? Well, I don't know. I don't know for sure what the authors of The Wind Waker intended to convey, but I can certainly form my own interpretation. This whole situation happened because the gods flooded Hyrule, holding back Ganon as long as they could while he was resurrected. Flooding an entire kingdom is essentially the nuclear option. Countless lives were presumably lost, homes were destroyed, and races who once populated Hyrule are either nowhere to be found or are rarely seen. It's hard to see the near total destruction of a kingdom as a good thing, even under any circumstance. And as much as it might seem like a complete reset, they're still reliant on a hero, perpetuating the cycle that caused Ganon to rise in the first place. When I talk about the gods, I'm referring to Din, Nehru, and Pharaoh. Pharaoh, the three golden goddesses who make up the Triforce, and were described as the creator gods of the world by the Great Deku Tree in the beginning of Ocarina of Time. Pharaoh? I don't know. They're the ones who are testing Link, and clearly have at least some influence over the world. The word god was also used to describe Zephos and Cyclos, two characters who appear in a minor role earlier in the game, but they have a lesser role as wind gods, and the fact that they make themselves known to Link shows that they're not as elusive as the golden goddesses. Part of that is because two different religions and their conceptions of gods are conflated here. Zephos and Cyclos bear similarities to Fujin and Raijin, two Shinto gods who represent wind and thunder respectively. The golden goddesses bear more resemblance to the Christian god. Not really with the goddesses' appearances, although their trinity could be analogous to the Holy Trinity in some branches of Christianity, but the way in which they're worshipped. Zelda has always been inspired by medieval Europe, and has used explicitly Christian imagery like crosses since the beginning, showing deep-rooted inspiration from Christianity. Knowing that, their flooding of Hyrule brings to mind the flood myth from the book of Genesis. God in the Old Testament isn't always merciful and loving. The books were written over the course of centuries, and many of them have different authors who describe differing interpretations of God. Some were as more vengeful, others were as more loving. Different people speak of different legends. So no, I don't think the golden goddesses are infallible or completely good. They would have to care about their people in some regards, otherwise why would they recruit a hero in the first place, but sometimes they make decisions that are a necessary evil to preserve their light. Now that Link has the Master Sword, he heads to the Forsaken Fortress. It's time to finally save his sister. The fortress is now a cakewalk, it's barely even a real dungeon, and in the end you defeat the Helmarok King, the bird who captured Link's sister in the first place. It's a really satisfying victory, because of the long-standing influence he had on the plot, and finally being able to progress past the fortress is very cathartic. Tetra and the other pirates show up to rescue Aryll, which is the name of Link's sister, by the way, and you come face to face with Ganondorf himself. It's clear that your journey is incomplete. The Master Sword isn't at full strength and can't defeat him, but the fact that it was pulled from its pedestal means that Ganondorf's forces are at full power. The blade seemingly had some kind of sealing effect that has now been undone. Ganondorf defeats us and Tetra effortlessly. He still incites so much dread, especially because he has a poetic way of speaking that gives him a lot of presence. He calls Tetra by the name of the Princess of Legend of Zelda, and before he can finish us off, Valu and the Rito come in clutch. As I said, the Rito postman is a bro. Now that we know Tetra has some connection to Zelda, we take her down to Hyrule. The King of Red Lions reveals that he was actually the King of Hyrule, transformed into this boat form, and Tetra was the reincarnated version of Princess Zelda. So the twist that Tetra is Zelda isn't too surprising. The name Tetra sounds similar to Zelda anyways, and when people are playing a Zelda game, they're gonna expect to see Zelda. If you've seen Tetra's room, it practically confirmed that she has a link, haha link, to the royal family of Hyrule. We all remember Sheik from Ocarina of Time, the worst kept secret in gaming history. There's some things that don't make that much sense when you realize Tetra wasn't aware she was Zelda. It seemed like she was aware of Link's destiny when she let him go to Outset Island ahead of him, and she's able to use Gossip Stone technology that was apparently property of the royal family, which isn't really given an explanation. Why does she keep those paintings in her pirate ship room anyways? That's easily hand-waved away though, and not really that interesting, especially because she was said to have been raised by her mother, who could have imparted those to her. What I'm interested in is what it does for her character. Tetra, like Link, is someone who needs to accept her responsibility and learn to embody a person of the past. After a Link to the Past reference, she's even transformed into a more Zelda-like form, with a dress and makeup. With Tetra, it's not hard to see the trope that a lot of media, especially video games, have, where tomboyish characters are forced to grow out of their characteristics and embrace femininity. It's a trope I hate that enforces rigidity to gender roles and portrays different expressions of gender as childish. Some have also pointed out that her Zelda form has lighter skin than her form as Tetra. I mean, sure, Tetra is probably just tanned or something, but it's still got colorist undertones that Zelda's pure princess form has lighter skin than her tomboy form. That said, I don't think it's entirely fair to say that this is an example of that trope in action. Tetra being a pirate is crucial to the plot, and the only time her tomboyish demeanor was really admonished is when the Rito postman says it was her fault that Link's sister was captured. which she already sort of atoned for by helping Link and returning his sister to Outset Island. She could have maybe had a bigger role as Zelda. She kind of just stays in the Master Sword room doing nothing for a while, but she's still Tetra, and that's why she's likable. I also do acknowledge there would have actually been riots in the street if a Zelda game did not have Zelda looking like Zelda. Now, the King of Red Lions being King Hyrule is surprising mostly because we didn't expect the king to be a central named character who appears in the game. Last time that happened, did not go very well. But it's not surprising that he is someone with deeper connections to the lore and plot. He confirms for us what we've already known. The gods flooded Hyrule because of Ganon's return. They knew that destroying the land would only grant Ganon of his wish of the kingdom being destroyed, though. So people were deliberately saved by going to various mountaintops, which have become the islands of this flooded world. I might be getting a little ahead of myself here, but let's make something clear. All the people and the new races are descended from the people of Ocarina of Time. So much about the world is recontextualized upon realizing this. The Kokiri have become the Koroks, the Zora evolved into the Rito, and Dragon Roost Island used to be Death Mountain. It doesn't all line up, but then again, neither did Hyrule Castle line up with the version from Ocarina of Time. Knowing this, there's something that feels a little sinister about it. Sure, the gods saved their people, and I don't think that's not supposed to be morally righteous, but it's still messy. And the fact that the gods had to flood the world is tragic. The Zora are fish people who can breathe underwater. It's hard to believe they would completely change to bird people by a process of natural selection. That implies the gods didn't want them in the water anymore. Maybe they only survive in fresh water, but there's still the matter that they're inhabiting Death Mountain, and the land's previous inhabitants, the Gorons, are gone. There's only 3 Gorons found in the game, and they're traveling merchants without a home. Did the Rito fight the Gorons, or did they just get wiped out in the flood? I don't know. The fact that the Kokiri are now made of wood is also quite creepy. It's never really explained or implied how that transformation happened. Another race, the Gerudo, are completely unaccounted for besides Ganondorf, whose backstory involves the fact that he is the only male Gerudo. Keep this Gerudo lore in mind, it will be important later. The Gerudo are a desert-faring people inspired by Middle Eastern culture, to the point that an Islamic symbol was controversially used to represent them in the original version of Ocarina of Time. In that game, they were broadly characterized as thieves and villains. Mind you, it was a game from 1998. In Wind Waker, no Gerudo can be found. I get the sense that Forsaken Fortress was meant to be their hideout, and it was said to have been used by pirates, but whether that was intentional is up to headcanon, especially because the only time the Gerudo were pirates was in Majora's Mask, which does not take place in Hyrule. The lack of the Gerudo and the Gorons can be explained by the Wind Waker's rushed development time, but the fact remains that the Wind Waker adheres closely to Ocarina of Time, and the fact that something from the world of that game is missing suggests something happened to them. To power up the Master Sword, Link must collect all 8 pieces of the Triforce of Courage and complete 2 dungeons, the Earth Temple and the Wind Temple. You can complete these quests in any order, which means that this is the point where the world really opens up to you. No matter what order you do the temples in, the dialogue will be adjusted to reflect that you've done one before, so it doesn't repeat the same explanation over again. Isn't that great? The dialogue avoids redundancies because they know you know the information from doing another temple already. Isn't that awesome? A really user-friendly decision. Wouldn't it be great if all games fucking did that so they weren't annoying as shit? Anyways, it was originally planned that the Wind Waker would feature more sections set in Hyrule. I think these temples were meant to be those sections. Their names directly bring to mind dungeons from Ocarina of Time, and there's a lot of sailing around to get to them, which would have made more sense if you were intended to go between flooded Hyrule and regular Hyrule. Anyways, in order to do these puzzles, we need the help of past NPCs from earlier dungeons, Medley and Makar. Both Medley and Makar are descended from the sages of Old Hyrule, which confirms them to be descendants of Kokiri and Zora. They both play instruments, and you conduct them with the Wind Waker to play some sacred music. They need to play to progress certain points in the dungeons, and they have abilities that can help with puzzles. The moment where Medley realizes she's the Earth Sage is emotionally powerful. She says the line, "There's something I can actually do to help this world," giving the sense that she's been waiting a long time for some purpose beyond her island. The people who populate the Wind Waker seem to be happy enough, but this line hints that at least some of them feel a sense of hopelessness or ennui. Maybe not Makar, he just seems like a silly guy. Now that both temples have been completed, the Master Sword is fully powered up. It's much stronger than it was before, and it now has a really cool effect when you unsheath it from its hilt. Next up, there's 8 pieces of the Triforce of Courage we must salvage from the ocean floor. This quest kinda sucks. I'm not here to pass judgment on something not related to the story, but there are a lot of questionable decisions that make up this part of the game, and it is so padded out. I don't actually mind when a game has a section that forces you to explore and collect items to progress, and the story takes a backseat to exploratory gameplay. It's sort of like a Final Fantasy game, where you can fully explore the world and complete side quests right before encountering the final boss. Only it's necessary in this case. Searching for the Triforce pieces has you sailing all throughout the world, and you can fully appreciate the scale of the world and its islands before the game's over. The frustrating part is that you need to decipher maps leading to the Triforce pieces, and in order to do that, you're forced to turn to Tingle. He charges ridiculous amounts of rupees, and if you haven't found both fairies that increase your wallet size, as well as stocked up on a bunch of rupees, you might have to grind, which is ridiculous for a part of the main story. It reeks of artificial padding in order to make the Wind Waker the same length as other Zelda games. Tingle charging you so much, as well as the way he mocks you if you can't pay, among other reasons, has spawned a massive hate campaign around him. Fans in the US legitimately despise Tingle to ludicrous degrees, and it's been theorized that's why some of the Tingle spin-offs have never been released in America. Once Link has collected the pieces of the Triforce, he heads back to sunken Hyrule. The Triforce appears on his hand, which confirms him to be a descendant of the Hero of Time. Link is christened the Hero of Wind. The wind is a recurring symbol throughout the Wind Waker. I mean, obviously. The winds are essential to survival on the seas. They're the means by which boats travel the great seas, and Link's command of the winds can send him anywhere across the known world, and is probably really annoying to anyone else sailing that day. The most prosperous island is Windfall Island, where the image of a huge windmill looms over the town. Winds also represent change and the course of history. When Ganondorf rises to power, it's described as a fell wind blowing throughout the land. And when he describes the way Hyrule seemed to prosper, it's in terms of the winds that blew throughout the land. It was probably strong winds and storms that flooded Hyrule after that too. The direction the wind blows represents the natural course the world moves in. If being the Hero of Time is to command time, being the Hero of Wind is to command the wind. Link influences the way the wind can blow, the way the world will move in the future. Link meets with Zelda in Hyrule Castle, where she's seemingly been standing in the exact same spot the whole time. Suddenly, in a flash of light, she's taken, and you have to fight 2 extra strong Dark Nuts. Zelda has been kidnapped by Ganondorf, and we must defeat him. It's the Save the Princess storyline. We venture through Hyrule for a comically short amount of time, and find ourselves within the final dungeon of the game, Ganon's Tower. Ganon's Tower is a pretty short dungeon, which might have been because of the Wind Waker's short development time. There's an homage to Ocarina of Time, which involves mini puzzles based on past dungeons we completed. One dungeon for each of the classical elements: wind, fire, earth, and wind again. After a puzzle involving Phantom Ganon, we see where Zelda is being held, and the final boss fight begins. This version of Ganondorf, to be clear, is a resurrection, not a reincarnation. He is the same Ganondorf who was the antagonist of Ocarina of Time. He even recognizes us as the successor to the Hero of Time. Ganondorf has maybe 10 minutes of total screen time in The Wind Waker, but he absolutely steals the show in this final battle. The way he speaks is elegant yet venomous. He calls out the gods for destroying the kingdom and is spiteful towards the people who still remain, calling them pathetic. Of course, that's rich coming from him who wanted to destroy Hyrule in the first place, and we're meant to understand that. The way he completely disregards any hope people who still remain have also shows a disregard for human life. But he does have a point that the gods flooding the world did a lot of damage, and that they're not just a force for good. In a really creepy scene, he transforms into Puppet Ganon, a huge beast who can transform into different forms and is controlled by strings. Oh wow, a puppet. That's like Symbology 101. After defeating him, we climb up his tower, and along with Zelda, come face to face with Ganondorf. Ganondorf delivers an unsolicited monologue that shows a side to him that wasn't apparent back in Ocarina of Time. The reason he hates the gods is because he's from a desert country, where the chances of survival for him and his people were slim. While the winds meant prosperity for the people of Hyrule, for the Gerudo they meant scorching heat all day and freezing cold at night. I coveted those winds, I suppose. In Ganondorf, it's not hard to see a man who started with good intentions but slowly became corrupt over time, even if Link seems completely stupefied as to why he'd tell him this at all. It's ambiguous just how deist the Legend of Zelda's world is. Do the gods simply leave the world be, or do they play an active role in the fates of the people? But if you genuinely believe there are gods in your world, and they affect fates of the people, and you were punished for no reason, it makes sense to be angry. While the true extent of Ganondorf's character can't be known for sure, this is a children's game after all, The Wind Waker gives you more to think about. It retroactively makes Ganondorf more complex in Ocarina of Time. While he is the villain, Ganondorf could have easily been called a hero to people like the Gerudo in a different telling of the legend. I'm not saying he's good, but I could see Ganondorf making the list of one of those top 10 video game villains who were actually right articles. Ganondorf wants to collect the Triforce so that he can harness the power of the gods to grant his wish to bring Hyrule back from destruction. He wants to rule over the Hyrule of old, the one that's been washed away. Now that he, Link, and Zelda have been assembled, all he needs to do is touch the Triforce and oh yeah, the King of Hyrule can teleport. I forgot about that. The King wishes for one thing. Hope. Hope for the future for Link and Zelda and the world. While Ganondorf represents regressing back to Hyrule's past, Link and Zelda represent the future. The King's speech is a little hokey. It does bring up the question of why didn't he just wish for Ganondorf to be dead, but it is a powerful moment to behold. Link and Zelda work together to fight Ganondorf. Now, I do think a little bit of the thematic relevance of this duel is lost, because at this point, Ganondorf's wish has already been shot down. He just wants to kill Link and Zelda, something which would make his dream impossible in the future. Sure, Link and Zelda dying would be bad, but they already have some God-given hope on their side, and this is no longer a fight for the fate of Hyrule in the same way it was before. Again, it still works as a final boss, and it's natural for the stakes to change in a climax, but I felt like this lowered them, it didn't raise them. I do like that Link and Zelda fight together though. In the end, Ganondorf is killed. Zelda shoots a light arrow at Link's shield, reflecting it back on Ganondorf, leaving him open to being stabbed in the head and sealed away. The king stays behind as Hyrule is flooded once more. Zelda says he can come up with them, but he refuses. It's implied that the king was a ghost or a spirit of some kind, so that's why he was able to teleport and why he possessed the boat Link used throughout the whole game. Both he and Ganondorf are manifestations of the past. Now it's up to Link and Zelda to move on to the future. Somewhere out there is a new land that will become the next Hyrule, but whatever it is won't be Hyrule. This is the culmination of the Wind Waker's theme of growing up. When characters like Link, Zelda, and Medley grew up, it was by accepting their destinies and by reliving the past. Medley defined her worth in terms of her relation to the past, and Tetra's role in the plot almost seemed to regress into a damsel in distress once she became Zelda. The Wind Waker's ending shows us that there's a different path forward. By clinging to the past, the same cycle only repeats itself further, and the conditions that Ganondorf arose from will just happen again. Quite literally, Ganon resurrects himself time and time again, because as long as there's a Triforce of Courage and a Triforce of Wisdom holder, there must be someone who holds the Triforce of Power as well. By rejecting this path, the Wind Waker shows us a Link who becomes unburdened from the same familiar cycle. Ganondorf represents repeating that cycle forever. He hates the gods, and despite being the antagonist, not all of his reasons are unfounded. But we've seen that his effect on the kingdom would be devastating. All he wants to do is take the winds of death the gods blew on him and direct it on the rest of Hyrule. Thus, the cycle would repeat. Link and Zelda make it to the surface, only Zelda is back to being Tetra again. The whole namesake of this series stops being, and she's returned to the familiar pirate we met on Outset at the beginning of the game. In a post-credits scene, Link, Tetra, and her pirates leave Outset behind in search of a new land. One that isn't Hyrule. Link's sister and grandma worry about him. So ends The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, and so begins a new legend. A lot of people felt that the promises of The Legend of Zelda: Wind Waker went unfulfilled. Many fans who fell in love with Ocarina of Time were disappointed by the Wind Waker's cel-shaded art style and wanted something more epic in scope. They felt Zelda wasn't growing up with them. Despite that, and despite all of its shortcomings, The Wind Waker stands as one of the most critically acclaimed Zelda games out there, and a classic title for the fanbase. When I first played Ocarina of Time, years after experiencing The Wind Waker, I actually felt a little disappointed. It wasn't bad by any means, but I ended up preferring slightly shorter Zelda games, with less dungeons and more exploration. To my surprise, The Wind Waker had influenced how I enjoy video games. Despite its bold new direction, The Wind Waker incorporates lots of imagery, locations, and even characters, 2 of them I think, from Ocarina of Time. The game uses its fan service moments to make a statement on its own legacy within the franchise. Nintendo knew The Wind Waker had big shoes to fill, considering the massive success and critical acclaim of Ocarina of Time. Even in the modern day, Ocarina of Time might just be the one game that most people have called the greatest of all time. The Wind Waker respects the past and simply moves on. It weaves a narrative about how growing up means learning from the past and moving on before you feel like you're ready to. When the developers at Nintendo were faced with an intense crunch and harsh expectations to create something that was like the past, only better, they decided to make a game about how you can't just cling to the past forever. You have to grow up, just like Link was forced to in order to save Hyrule. For all the talk about the reception to The Wind Waker, we only see one side of this story. Fans who were a bit older and wanted something like Ocarina of Time. What we miss out on is the next generation who are having their first Zelda experience. For the kids who didn't grow up with Ocarina of Time's atmospheric visuals, iconic music, somber title screen, and really terrifying shit they should not have put in a kid's game, the legend goes a little bit differently. There's another side to the discussion on The Wind Waker's promises being unfulfilled. Its legacy. The Wind Waker received 2 direct sequels on DS, The Legend of Zelda: Phantom Hourglass, and The Legend of Zelda: Spirit Tracks. They are some of the few Zelda games to not feature Ganon as an antagonist, nor do they feature Hyrule as a main location. Well, the land from Spirit Tracks is called New Hyrule. The king made a big deal about how the land won't be Hyrule, and then they called it New Hyrule. The 2 games fulfill the promise of Zelda going in an interesting new direction, and both of them have become extremely divisive within the fanbase. In one of those games, Zelda is a ghost and Link is the hero of trains. But a few months after Phantom Hourglass released, the next mainline 3D Zelda came out on GameCube and Wii. The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess. It took us back to Hyrule and reintroduced lots of characters and elements from Ocarina of Time. Epona, Skull Kid, Navi, even the hero of time himself technically returns. Twilight Princess took the series to a much darker tone. Link started the game as an adult, and it was a huge crowd pleaser for fans of Ocarina of Time that might not have liked the direction the Wind Waker went in. The plot is incompatible with the events of the Wind Waker, suggesting it to be an alternative series of events or even its own timeline. Twilight Princess isn't just a repeat of Ocarina of Time, to be fair, but nostalgia was a big part of its appeal. Knowing that, is the promise of the Wind Waker's ending fulfilled? It suggests a bold new direction for the future of the franchise, doing away with the same old story of reincarnation and Hyrule. Can we say that this was fulfilled with Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks? Or does the fact that they're just DS games without a long-standing impact on the rest of the franchise invalidate them? Is it disingenuous for Nintendo to just go back to Hyrule as if the Wind Waker had never happened? I don't know for sure. I'm sure Twilight Princess has its own generations of people who played it when they were 8 that appreciate its thematic depth, just as I can with the Wind Waker. For now, I will continue to sing the praises of the Zelda game I played when I was 8. It might not be the perfect Zelda game, and you'll find a lot more content in both Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time, but it is my Zelda game, and I think its legacy and the story it's trying to tell matters. That is the legend I'll speak of. Thank you so much for watching. You probably heard this from YouTubers a lot, but I genuinely did not intend for this video to be so long at first. It was a ton of fun though, both writing this script and beating all of the Wind Waker twice over. That was great too. Hopefully I'll see you next time.